now is scheduled to speak tonight to the public after his offer. Yeah. I just want to state a couple of ground rules and just to repeat what we had decided, which is that Mr. PRUSSIN will speak for however long he chooses to speak, and that will be it. There will be no discussion from the public at all after that. So.
Thank you. Everybody can hear me? Okay. A lot has been written and said about me and my proposal that was made to the Board of Ed the last 6 months, both the newspapers and the mail-outs. The reason why I asked to come in person today was to explain to everybody where I was coming from on my proposal and set the record straight. Before I do that, I want to thank 2 people. One is Ed Imperator, who's a resident of Tenafly. He's a friend of mine. Who's an attorney who helped draft all the documents between the Board of Ed and myself, thinking we were doing something good for the town. He never took a cent. He did this on his own volunteer work. Second person I'd like to thank is Glenn Eberhardt, the superintendent of schools, who took a lot of garbage that he didn't deserve. He took it like a man. He too thought what I was proposing was sound for the students as well as for the town of Tenafly. In September, I walked into the athletic director, Ed Cromer's office, sat down in his chair, and I said, you know, Ed, I've had 6 children who have gone through the Board of Ed system in Tenafly. I'll have 2 more who goes through the Board of Ed system in Tenafly. I've coached in this town since 1985. A couple of years ago, I went and you rented the lights for Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night games. It's a great turnout in the town. I found it to be a great family situation, which is something I really based my whole life on, was the family. And I'd like to do something for Tenafly, but more so for the kids of Tenafly and the parents, working parents, who don't get an opportunity to see their kids play. And I made this proposal to Ed Cromer to renovate the field. Honest to God, if I knew the turmoil and what it was going to create these last 6 months, I never would have walked into Ed Cromer's office. I really thought I would unite Tenafly. Instead, everybody took it the wrong way. I've been the subject of a lot of articles. I do not like publicity. At first, it was supposed to be anonymous. I do not like things written about me when people don't know me. So now I'm going to explain myself. I went to a meeting in November, which the superintendent was nice enough to have the local people that were surrounded most affected by my proposal. And I sat there, and I had to hear some people would say, you know, 5 years ago, when you had a track meet, the school buses blocked the driveways. We can't invite people over. We can't park our cars. I walked out of the meeting very disillusioned. And a few people came over to me and said, George, don't worry. I said, they're not complaining about my proposal. They're complaining that they moved next to the school. It has nothing to do with me what happened 5 years ago. It would have nothing to do next week and last week when I went to the track meet and saw what was going on. I've received some letters that were sent to the superintendent, 2 of which I'd like to comment on. The first letter. Who is this fellow, Mr. PRUSSIN? He lives on the east side of the tracks, and he wants to build a soccer field on the west side of the tracks. Why don't he do it where he lives? I want to respond to that. First of all, I have never known there was an east side of the tracks in Tenafly and a west side of the tracks. I have raised 8 children not to know there was an east side of the tracks or a west side of the tracks. I have the same amount of friends on the east side of the tracks as I do on the west side of the tracks, and if I could build a soccer field in my backyard, I would. So I couldn't do it. The next letter I wrote, it'd be hard. It's about a person they wrote a letter saying, I plan to retire in 5 years. If we go through with this proposal, I'm going to lose all my value in my house, and I'll never be able to retire. I grew up in Brooklyn. My dad owned a hardware store. My 2 sisters and I lived on top of the hardware store in a building. My father was wealthy enough to buy a house for $14,000. We all knew what the value of the house is. The last thing I would want to do to any human being was devalue what their house was worth. That wasn't what I was doing. Let's look at the proposal. I proposed the following. 1, take the natural grass, put down artificial grass. Proven, safe, used in high school, colleges, and by the professionals. Endorsed by everybody. This would give the kids more of an opportunity to play. Right now the ball field's used for 5 football games, maybe half a dozen soccer games. If it rains, they'd have the opportunity to use the field. It would dry quick. Proven, safe, artificial grass. Second part of the proposal, put some comfortable stands where we now call the visitor side. So for people to come, this would be the home side. People could sit down and watch the game in comfortable stands. The third part of the proposal, put in a men's room and a ladies' room. Nice, clean. In the 16 years I've used a men's room, I should call it an outhouse, once. I'll never go there again. I've never been to the ladies' room, but I know I would never let my wife or daughters use that ladies' room. So I was proposing bathrooms. Now, let's everybody do something now for 1 second. I'm going to ask you to do something we all ask our children to do. Let's be honest. The renovated field, because that's all it was, with the stands, with the bathrooms, that was going to create more traffic, more parking problems, more noise? If you're honest, the answer's got to be no. If you got 30 people coming to the soccer game, which we're lucky if we do, we might have 40. Now, let's talk about the fourth part of the proposal, where if this was your only complaint from day one, I would have sat down and discussed it. But I cannot discuss the problems you had 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, and what you're going to have next year. Because you're going to have the same parking problems, whether I put my proposal in or not. I proposed the lights. Why did I propose the lights? Because that weekend that I went, it was the most wonderful thing to see the Tenafly people show out as a group to support their teams. It's like the 4th of July when we all show up, put down a picnic blanket, have our picnic, and we cheer the teams on. So I proposed the lights. Let's go a little further with the lights, if we had an open mind. The soccer and football season is played September, October, November. Of those 12 weekends, there would probably be 5 night games, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. 5 times 3 is 15 night games where the games would be on till 10:30. And I will not buy anybody's story that we were going to rent out or let any other places use the field. This was for Tenafly, period. Superintendent will back that up, and so will the Board of Ed back that up. This was for Tenafly. So for 15 nights, now let's figure that out. That's 4%. 4% of the year. We had about 500-600 signatures of the people against. That's 5 to 10% of the population, of the voting population. You know, statistics show that teenagers, males and females, who participate in a team sport are much less likely to get involved with drugs, get involved with alcohol. Isn't it worth 5%, 4% to put the lights on a year if somebody would have come out and said, you know what, I'm going to go out for that team. I want to play on a state-of-the-art field. If in 30 years we saved one kid from testing out drugs, wouldn't everybody have gotten satisfaction and gratification? No. I think some people were selfish, but I'm going to live with that. I received a letter on March 22nd from the Committee of the Peaceful Commons. I was out of town from March 19th to March 30th, so I did not read the letter till March 30th. But yet there was an article in the newspaper, the Bergen Record, how I didn't respond to the letter by March 27th. Being honest with you, it's hard to respond to something you never got. I was in Florida with my kids. Now this letter is a very neighborly, warm letter. Dear Mr. PRUSSIN, we are writing to you today as fellow Tenafly citizens, as his neighbors. Much has been said and written about the proposed sports complex at GEISSINGER Field. We, however, believe an important dialogue has not yet taken place. Namely, a dialogue between you as the donor and ourselves as the neighbors most affected by the proposed project. While we commend your generosity to the town, we believe the only way to truly understand the depths of our concerns is to meet with us as neighbors and to hear our concerns in person. It is our hope that we can meet at a mutually agreeable time and place to begin a dialogue that will benefit the entire town. This is a very warm, neighborly letter. I would have sat down. But your carbon copy, the Record, the Suburbanite, the New York Times, I don't like publicity. I'm not going to fight a political war in the newspapers. You don't want it, you don't have it. That's what you have to do. But I don't want to bring in the newspapers to this. If you wanted to sit down with me, you sit down like gentlemen and ladies. You can't bring in the newspapers. That's not what I want. I don't want to read my name in the paper. Maybe you do, I don't want to read it. Right now, there's a group of you that are angry that you live next to the school. I feel bad, but you elected to live next to the school. When you live next to the school, there are school functions. You knew that when you bought your house. You got a benefit of the value when you move next to the school. Whatever your house is worth, I don't want it blamed on George PRUSSIN. That's what the value of the house is worth at the time you sell. And to be honest with you, I'm not a real estate broker, but I think with my improvements, it might have helped the value, not hurt the value of a state-of-the-art field. I'm just about done, except I have to say one last thing, because it wouldn't be fair. I asked two former presidents of the Board of Ed, one in Haworth and one in another community not far. What is the job description of a party on the Board of Ed? Simple. They're here to make decisions that benefit the children, and they're here to make decisions that benefit the children and does not cost the taxpayers money. There is not one person here, if they're honest, there's not one human being in the state of New Jersey that can look at me and say my proposal did not benefit the students, did not cost the taxpayers money. I was willing to foot the bill. On that infamous meeting, March 19th, a board member stood up and read a statement against that proposal. I believe it's now time for that board member to do a gut check and see where her responsibilities lie. This was for the benefit of the town. What I was looking to do was for kids. I love children, I love sports, I love competition. If I didn't love children so much, I wouldn't have any. Thank you for your time. It's all finished.